This is Joshua Federspiel with the Persuasive speech. Since 1980 to the present, tuition has gone up by 945%, and from 1988 to the present, the family expected contribution has gone from 22% to 50%. The three things I'll be talking about today are the family contribution, the unfair expectations, and the flaws in the free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as the FAFSA. Family contribution is mainly focused around the families just above the poverty line. These families are at a disadvantage because the financial aid judges how much a student should receive based on how much their family's gross income is, but it doesn't take into account the credit card debt, mortgages, the automobile, the living expenses that go alongside all the other things they're paying for a year. Things like this are why there's a socioeconomic stratification, which is layering between each economic position between otherwise known as classes. Most of the middle class families miss financial aid cuts because they do not make enough to pay for school. So they don't make enough to pay for it, but they make too much to actually get grants and enough loans to cover school. So it makes it more difficult for them to actually cover all the tuition costs. The loans, such as the Stanford loan, may only cover 50% or more. Sometimes it covers all the tuition, but a lot of times it does not. And students may be forced to apply for other scholarships or apply for other loans, such as the Direct Plus loan for parents. But that causes the parents have to co-sign on the loan, and a lot of parents aren't comfortable with doing that, seeing as it's for thousands of dollars. And the solutions to this are universities should attempt to raise the cutoff spots for scholarships and federal aid so a wider range of people are accepted for these. And more grant money and loan money should be given to cover a larger amount of the tuition, so the amount that each student receives should be larger, whether they have to give out fewer to more qualified students or add more money to the pool for students to get money from. The second is the school's acceptance policy, and it's called need blind, which is when the college acceptance committees are looking to see if they should accept someone into the college. They look and see how much financial aid they'll actually need. This is a pretty poor way of doing it because it takes the student's financial aid into consideration over their merit, whether they're extremely intelligent or qualified to go to school. The acceptance policies also hinder students because colleges are more likely to accept someone who can full-on pay for the tuition instead of taking loans and grants. This leaves the more poor students out because usually they take the more well-equipped financially students over them. And a solution for this is the purely need-blind system, in which universities can't see the financial aid the students have until they've accepted them. This makes it solely based on merit and whether or not they're intelligent and qualified enough to go to school. According to Steve Cohen, the bottom 25% of admission is saved for athletes, people of race, and larger donors. And to score decently to get into a university, you should aim for at least the upper 50%, because the bottom below that is saved for people that it's not based on merit, it's based on other things. And also, schools tend to misuse test scores. A lot of schools decide to make test scores optional. So if you want to submit your ACT or SAT score, you can, but if you don't, they won't count it against you. This is a way of only taking in the highest test scores, and because students who don't have a high test score are most likely not going to submit their score. So this way, all the scores submitted are are going to be high, and the lower ones are not. They're going to leave out, and this makes their average test score of their students higher, which causes the university's ranking to go up. It's usually about the ranking of the university. The higher the test scores, the higher the ranking of the university. And third is the FAFSA, which stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And according to Barbara Austin, PhD, she has calculated the average financial aid need. The Ivy League schools are $230,000, the public universities are $120,000, and the four-year universities are $180,000. And the FAFSA affects the middle class more than anyone else because the wealthy part of the population doesn't really need to apply for the FAFSA, and obviously the poorer side of the population is going to apply for it and get a large amount. So the middle class is really the ones who are unsure of what they're going to get, and it's very important for them to get a lot because, I mean, the numbers for each university, the Ivy League, the public university, and the four-year university are really high. So the average middle class family saves about $1,600 for school, and this is obviously not enough to even cover a semester. So students are forced to turn to loans and grants, and these loans and grants are only going to drive them into debt, and that's hoping that they graduate and they get their degree and whatnot. And the FAFSA is responsible for handing out this financial aid. The problems with the financial aid is the FAFSA doesn't take into account the current debts the family has, like the credit card, mortgages, automobile, and etc., and how much money they actually have for saving. So it doesn't really account for how much they've really built to go to school or how much they can put towards school. So it really hurts them because when the FAFSA looks at your annual gross income, your family may make $80,000, but in reality you have $15,000 for spending or less, and they expect most of that to go to college, which is unfair. And students' independence is also a big problem with the FAFSA, because even if a student lives on their own and pays for everything, their financial aid is still based on their parents, even if their parents aren't helping them at all. And when parents choose not to help their children pay for school and financial aid ignores them, this is where students get left behind and left out of going to college because they can't afford it on their own, but the financial aid is judging on their parents paying for it, but their parents don't pay for it. So they kind of get stuck with these high tuition costs but no help. And the last big problem with this is students are declared, even if a student is declared as independent on their tax form, they're still classified as dependent on their financial aid form until they're 25. Financial aid shouldn't be so black and white with who can get a certain amount of money and who can't. There shouldn't be a cutoff line. There should be gray areas of students with extreme need and whatnot, where if they can provide proof and appropriate documentation, grant money and loan money should be more attainable to them because they need it more than the average person. And instead of focusing on what federal aid thinks of your family contribution, they should take a little more time to determine how much the family is actually helping with the money that you need to go to school, because it goes past tuition, it's books, it's travel expenses. It only gets higher if you live on campus. So in conclusion, colleges are taking advantage of students with financial aid. Students that don't have the financial background to support themselves while going to school or to pay for school, unless they're above or under the poverty line, they don't get enough federal aid and money from the university, And if they're wealthy, the wealthy don't really have to worry about it because they're obviously going to be taken care of. And it's evident through family contribution, unfair expectations in the FAFSA, that there are many different things that hold students back from going and attending university. And Daniel Loser, who interviewed the former president of George Washington State University, said the most effective financial aid policy is raising the cost of tuition, but essentially decrease the number of students who are actually forced to pay full price. Some 40% of people can actually pay full price. And when he said this, it really bothered me, because this means that the middle class is going to be stuck with grants and loans when the wealthy can pay for it. The poor are probably going to get most of it in grants, and the middle class is going to be stuck paying these loans for X amount of years because they couldn't afford to pay for school on their own and they weren't poor enough to get grant money. So it really puts them in a poor financial situation. And ideals like this are the main problem with college tuition, because it really hinders the middle class and puts the poor and the wealthy ahead of them, even though the middle class is also working hard too.